such a new grid next year, which is obviously exciting for loads of reasons, nervy for some of the drivers. As a former driver, one of the more stressful elements of your job, I guess, the securing of seats and not knowing where you'll be, but having to focus on the race, but not knowing where the next season will be and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things when you've been on the outside, it's quite nice to be watching because it adds a layer of intrigue into the season. But being one of the players in the market who is unsettled, I think is really not a good feeling.
Hello and welcome to The Fast and the Curious with me, Team Principal Greg James. Like any good team boss, it's important that you rest your drivers and you give them time off. And this is in no way bad management on my part that they're both off at the same time. I'm still getting to grips with leave requests and scheduling. So it's just me. Or is it just me this week? I'm not alone, actually, for this episode. I wanted to book someone who has the strength of at least 5 presenters. I'd like to welcome back our good friend, former F1 driver, Sky pundit, normally in race control or in the commentary box. It's friend of Fast and Curious podcast. It's Karun Chandhok. Karun, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Have you been checking the expenses over the summer break, Team Principal? Because are they charging you the McDonald's they're eating on holiday?
Yeah, I've had to. Yeah, Christian Hugo's got a stationary budget now because he goes through so much paper and so many pens with all his stats.
It's amazing, those notebooks, aren't they?
Karun, it's really great to chat to you at any time, but especially during the summer break because this is a moment where we can take stock. So this is very much a taking stock episode of The Fast and the Curious as the dust settles on a really exciting first half of the season. We've got some of your predictions to go through from when we chatted pre-season. We're going to go through some of those and see what's come true, see what hasn't come true.
Yeah.
And I want to get, before we get into that, an insight into what you do on your summer break, because we're interrupting your break, aren't we? But thanks for doing it.
Well, I'm in Toronto. My wife is Canadian, so we've come across to see the in-laws. I'm in my father-in-law's basement office. But yeah, we're just here with the kids and, riding bikes and trying to soak up the sun, although it's a thunderstorm outside, so that's not quite going to plan.
Now, let's roll the clock back to when you were an F1 driver. Can you talk us through what your summer break would have been like and whether you liked it? Did you welcome the summer break? I guess it maybe depended on how you were form-wise going into it.
Yeah, I think the reality is, also the calendar's just grown so much, Greg, right? We're already 14 races into the season. If you rewind a bit more to, let's say, the Damon Hill era, there were 16 races in the whole season. So,
right.
We've crammed in 14 races, basically between March and July, right? That was the last week of February. So it's been super intense. So I think everyone is ready for a break. Honestly, wandering around the paddock in Spa, and the first sentence whenever you said to people, how are you, was just waiting for Sunday night. Everyone was pretty fried, I think. It's been a lot because we started off with what looked like we were in for another snooze fest, and then it's just ramped up and the season's got more intense. So I think everyone's ready for a little reset. Some more than others, probably.
Well, I mean, on that, do you feel like there are too many races now?
I think so. My personal view is 2021 is probably the maximum. I think there does come to a point of fatigue, right, in any sport. If you and I are big cricket fans, but I quite like the fact that the Ashes happen when they do. We don't have the Ashes happening every quarter.
No. It
makes it special. And I think, logically, you add more races, it brings the value of each one of them down because people think, I don't need to watch this. There's another one coming up next week.
Yeah.
Having said that, the viewing numbers we've had this year are the highest they've ever been. Oh. So maybe I'm talking utter people do want to watch it all the time.
That's it. Yeah. And can I just, for the record, just say that you were the first person to bring up cricket. I've been warned about talking too much cricket and making this into a cricket podcast. I've already got one of those. But you, for the record, you brought it up.
Yeah, but they're not here now. The other two are not here.
But this is the thing, though, that there's always an audience for these things. But and that's fine, and people want to make money, and that's good, and you've got to give people what they want. But maximizing those drivers and making sure that the teams aren't too knackered, and making sure that that's the priority, isn't it? And that's always the thing when with the cricket argument, to bring that back, is that they always say, yeah, but people want to watch it and the grounds are selling out and the people are watching it on telly. Yes, but the people who are playing it are exhausted, and that's the tipping point, isn't it, that you're getting at, really?
And actually, it's not about the drivers. When I think of fatigue, I don't think of the drivers so much, because, listen, most of them are flying in on their private jets. They rock up on a Thursday morning and they're flying out Sunday night, sitting in 1A. It's more, the people working in the teams, the mechanics, the catering teams, the engineers, all of that stuff. They're not sitting in the comfy seats. They're flying in on a Tuesday, going back on a Monday. So they're away for a week at a time. It will increasingly create a burnout. And it's tough for families. I at Sky, we've all cut back. None of us can really do all of the races and have a family life. So we all do between sort of 14 to 16. Crofty does a few more. But that's the only way to have some semblance of a family life, frankly, for your mental health. And I know people use the word mental health in a flippant way nowadays, but I think it's really important. If I'm on the road all the time, my wife and kids are miserable, then I'm miserable.
Yeah.
It's quite simple. So I think the summer break is good. And I on the whole, would have 2021 races. But listen, I'm not the one doing the bank balance checks every month in the F1 office. So more the merrier for them.
On the summer break, actually, Hattie's got a good question. We've been talking about the drivers and the teams. Some will have momentum going into the break. Some will need to just rebuild and just take stock a second. But her question is about how much the summer break actually impacts if they're not allowed to do any work, and how strict is that? Because we've heard stories about it, but from your perspective, being behind the wheel and in a team, what is that actually like, and who's controlling that?
So the FIA have ruled that every team has to take two weeks off in the summer break. And that's the entire team. That's the factory, that's the race team, that's all of it. Although there are some caveats. For example, I think like marketing activities can carry on. The team principals, for example, can carry on. So there's certain things which are excluded from it. Really, it's about the technical people having a break. Now, I guess it depends on what sort of person you are, right? If you're able to switch your brain off completely and just go lie on a beach or do the garden or whatever, then that's great. And that's for you. Formula One people inherently are unbelievably competitive. So they can't log into their email servers. They can't log into, for example, the servers where all the drawings are or where any of the technical data is. Their phones are completely, their work phones have to be fully switched off, all that sort of stuff. But you can't turn your brain off. So if you've got some color pencils and a sketch pad and you're thinking of the way air flows around the front wing end play, you might be doing a bit of sketching at home. So I'm trivializing it, but I think that is the thing. And I think there is value in that, isn't it? Like if anyone who's in any job, if you're just doing it all the time, every week, sometimes you just need to take a little bit of a breather, just take yourself out of the bubble. And maybe that's when the fresh ideas come. Because, and I think I said this at our pre-season podcast, designing a Formula One car is an art form. It's a creative process. It's got the underpinnings of mathematics and physics, but it is a creative process. And any artist will tell you they've got to be in the right headspace, right? I mean, your wife writes books. If she's not in the right headspace to write, you're not gonna be able to create. So, I think that's where the summer break I think is useful, is to just channel the creativity once again for the second half of the year.
Were you the sort of person to go off and do races or cycling holidays or skiing or whatever it might be? Were you water sports type things?
I think you have to remember I was living 6,000 miles from my family in the UK. So for me, it was just about wanting to go back and see my mates and see my parents and just see the dog and try not to get fat on my grandmother's food over the summer break. So
lovely, delicious ghee.
Exactly that. Just trying to go and live a normal life and remind your friends and family you're alive, and not just some bloke on the telly
driving really fast like a maniac.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the season so far then.
Okay.
This is the same season that Carlos Sainz won in Australia after having major surgery. We had the George Russell doing the Yabba Dabba Doo. We've had 7 different race winners. We've had Oscar Piastri's first win. We had the controversy surrounding that win with the switching of the places.
Yeah.
Then there's been all the driver market gossip. Who's going where? They're staying here. This person's Adrian Newey left Red Bull. We had the whole Christian Horner stuff. There's so much. I mean, that's why the viewing figures are up, surely, because it's got interesting again, and there are stories, and sport is nothing without stories. So where would you like to begin, Karun?
Your team principal, you're supposed to be steering the ship.
Well, I know. I just okay. What is there a moment where you thought, oh, it's hotting up?
Yeah, 100%. And for me, that was Miami. Not because Lando won, because actually I think he won. He was a little bit lucky to win with the safety car there. But actually the way that whole weekend unfolded, that was the first time I thought McLaren look like they've got a car that's as fast as Red Bull. They kind of cocked up qualifying. They had, in the sprint quali, the tyres didn't work. The main quali, they were fine, but they weren't ahead of Max. But I felt disappointed because I felt they could have been ahead of Max. And that was a good feeling because I thought, ooh, it's on now. So I think I would pinpoint Miami as the point at which I thought, okay, this is going to come alive here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Miami was a popular one from the listeners, a popular moment where things changed. Rebecca makes an interesting point about it. She says that she thinks that Oscar will end up winning more races by the end of the season than Lando, because that was famously Lando's first win in Miami. So maybe we should dive into the McLaren story, because that's been really interesting this year, isn't it? That's really been the hot on track story, hasn't it? The McLaren story.
Yeah, I think so. And I think she's got a point, because from Imola onwards, which is the next race after Miami, if you look at the championship battle, Verstappen scored 141. So actually, even though it feels like the whole pack has been beating him, he's still scored more points than anyone in the last 8 races. Mm-hmm. But it's Oscar who's second. If the World Championship started in Imola, it'd be Verstappen 141, Oscar just 15 points behind. That's only a third place. Lewis would be third, and Lando would be fourth if you took the last 8 races, right? So, it's amazing how, Oscar's been amazing. Honestly, in the last 18 months. For me, Budapest was a real standout moment. Again, not because he won, but because the manner that he drove the first 40 laps of that race. Last year, Budapest, he was really struggling. He had terrible tyre wear. He just dropped off the cliff and was really struggling. And when he got out in front, I was watching it. I was back in London, and I was watching it, and I thought, ooh, he's okay. He's got 3 seconds. Ooh, he's hanging on. Lando's going to get him. But he just stayed there. The gap stayed at 3 seconds, and it went to 4. And I thought, okay, he's cracked it. He's got his head around this Formula One thing, and I think that was a big, big day for him to lay down a marker that he's now he is an equal to Lando.
Wow, big call. Yeah, I agree. But to hear you say that is fantastic, because you've done it.
Yeah, but he's also outscored him by 10 points in the last 8 races. I know there's varying circumstances and there's non-finishes, etc., etc. But I think there will be races still on a Sunday where Lando will have a slight edge. I think in qualifying they are equal, actually. But I would probably say that in the second half of the year, I'd take a little punt and say that Oscar will outscore Lando.
All right. Looking forward to the end of season review when we can actually...
Yeah, I'm probably going to be absolutely abused by the Lando fans here, but, No,
but this is the thing. Look, you can celebrate Oscar without that being a comment on Lando.
Correct.
I mean, it's wonderful that you've got 2 brilliant drivers that are so talented and both personally ambitious, but ambitious for the team. And we were talking about this on a previous episode and it's an interesting bit of sports psychology that I love. And, one of the reasons we love cricket is because of the games within a game and the story within the story, and the story of Lando being the number 1 McLaren driver, being there longer than Oscar. And Lando will feel a new pressure because you've got the other guy, the new kid, doing really, really well. So that will either push Lando on to drive better, or it can make him feel uneasy. And at the moment, it looks like we're seeing that Lando is slightly unsettled by Oscar being so prolific.
And I think the team need to also raise their game, honestly, a little bit, because I think they have got two incredibly talented drivers. And you have to say, Zach and Andrea Stella have done a brilliant job locking those two down, because surely they've got to be at the top of the list of Mercedes or Red Bull if they were available, right? So they've locked them down. But I do get the sense, Lando cost himself the win, maybe with a poor start in a couple of races. Certainly Budapest and Barcelona. I feel like strategically, the team didn't want to roll the dice and take a risk in Spa, whereas Mercedes did with George. I know he got disqualified at the end, but actually strategically, they took a chance and it paid off.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a few things, and I think in Budapest as well, they probably made their lives harder with all the team radio stuff. They didn't need to put themselves in that situation. So I think that the drivers have really raised their game. The team, technically, in terms of the car design and development, has massively raised their game. And now I think operationally at the track, that there needs to be, another little step up to match what Red Bull have been doing.
And what is that down to? Is that a lack of bravery in those big moments? Is it being tentative and not taking the bold move? Is that a lack of experience? What does that come down to?
I think it is a philosophy, right, of how brave and bold you want to take, how much do you want to take a risk. And on a day where Max is not going to win, your chance to win the championship comes from just doing something a bit different and maybe just rolling the dice and taking a punt. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if you're there to try and catch, then you got to try and do something. I think that's where you throw in the pinch hitter and you throw in the leg spinner at some point when the pace bowlers are not bowling. We're going to keep chucking in these cricket things as much as we can.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. But no, you're right. Sometimes you got to make a bold decision and open with a spin bowler. That might, it just it unsettles people a little bit when you do something unpredictable. So let's talk about your drivers of the season then. You can include, obviously, the McLaren boys if you so wish, but elsewhere on the grid as well would be interesting to get your take. Who's surprised you or who's maybe let you down slightly, Karun?
I don't know if anyone's really surprised me. Ollie Behrman, probably.
Wow.
I mean, what a boy to get points. He didn't even know he was driving at 1 p.m. on Saturday, and then he got points on Sunday. And actually, it kind of shows how, it's such a carpe diem moment for him, right? Because if you look at his F2 season, it's not going well. So if an F1 team had to sign him up purely based on his F2 results, I'm not sure he would have got on the grid. But because he did a great job on that Saudi weekend, and because he's done a good job when doing the FP1 sessions with Haas, he's got himself into that race seat for next year, which is totally deserved because he's a great talent, I think.
Yeah.
But it just shows that when you get these opportunities, however they may come, and it was unfortunate for Carlos, obviously, but you got to seize it. And that's got to be the surprise of the season, hasn't it?
Yeah, I guess also the thing that made that extra special was that it was in a Ferrari.
I know.
You think that he'll have a good season next year?
I think so. I think, him and Ocon will be a good lineup for that team. You'd have to say Haas have been a good surprise as well, because they had a pretty rubbish year last year. And while the paddock fans were all mourning the loss of Günther Steiner and his entertaining value, ultimately, it's about the results on track. And you'd have to say Ayo Komatsu has done a brilliant job so far.
Almost immediately as well, for the Gunter fans, it was a bit like, oh God, okay, yeah. Someone else has come in and done a really good job quite quickly here.
Yeah, exactly, right. And they've gone from last to seventh. They're only 7 points off RB. They've got more than double the points of Alpine. But you'd have to say they've been a bit of a positive surprise so far this year.
Other drivers that you've enjoyed watching this year?
I think I've enjoyed watching the McLaren boys, because I think, there's a bit of needle there definitely now coming in, but they're both such positive characters for the sport, and they're just bloody good drivers. So I've really enjoyed watching them. I've enjoyed watching Yuki Tsunoda. I feel like he stepped up this year. I honestly thought he was going to get blown away by Daniel, and I said it in Australia to him. Actually, I said I owe you an apology because you've massively raised raised your game.
What did he say to you? Did he say, "Don't worry about it"?
He's a very polite guy. He sort of smiled and said, "Oh, thank you."
It's interesting. I asked my drivers, Christian and Betty, what their driver of the season would be, and Betty said Yuki Tsunoda. And in his school report, Betty has written the following: feels like he's been on an upward trajectory performance-wise. Visa Cash App RB buy one get one free are still in the lower midfield, but he's been able to show his potential, outperformed Daniel Ricciardo a few times, and showing his potential for a Red Bull seat. Do you think he'd be in for a shout for the Red Bull seat?
It's weird. They don't seem interested in him, isn't it? It's like he just stands there, put his hand up in the air saying, "Pick me, pick me, pick me." Mm. Yeah, I feel a bit bad. It's like when you're playing those games at school and you're just sort of like saying, "Hello."
The last one on the bench.
Last one on the bench. It's a shame for him because he has done a great job this year, but it doesn't look like he's a contender for that seat.
Christian's driver of the season so far is Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
So he says has won races lesser drivers wouldn't have won. Imola by less than a second. Canada despite the weather. He's the only one of the top drivers racing well enough consistently to be world champion.
I would have to agree. If you ask me today to pick who's been the best driver of the first 14 races, it's got to be Max. Barcelona is an example, right? He got qualified by Lando, got ahead of Lando at the start, but both of them got overtaken by George Russell. But he knew that to win this race, his race wasn't going to be with George. He knew the Mercedes wasn't quick enough. But what he needed to do was use George as a buffer as much as he could. Mm. So, and to me, that was a moment where that was a Max Verstappen win. In a weekend, Checo wasn't in the top 10. Max made that happen. And so, yeah, I agree with Christian. I think there have been, so many weekends where I don't think the Red Bull has been the fastest car, yet he's even in the last 8 races, I said, he's outscored everybody else.
I've really enjoyed watching Carlos Sainz drive this season. I think that he's been, it's also a lovely little story within the story because obviously he's been binned by Ferrari for Lewis Hamilton for next year. So he's gone out there and gone, you know what? I'm just going to show everyone what I can do. This is my audition for all the other teams. So if you look at the race winners, and that's another big talking point. My favorite thing about this season so far is we've had different race winners. So in order, Max, then Carlos, then Lando, then Charles Leclerc, then George, then Lewis, and then Oscar. That's good for the sport, isn't it? That you've got a resurgent Mercedes team, you've got a McLaren team that are on the up, you've got a decent-ish Ferrari, which needs some work, I think you'd probably agree, and obviously you've got Max out there as well. That makes it interesting. That's what gets people into watching the races, isn't it?
And haven't there been such good feel-good stories as well? Like Lewis winning the British Grand Prix. I mean, wow. Amazing.
That's my moment. That's got to be the moment of the year, whatever happens.
100%.
For me, that's moment of the year. It's one of the all-time great sporting moments, that, isn't it? Because what that meant to him.
There was a bit of the old magic, wasn't it? There was the old magic was there, and I saw Bono when he came off the podium, drenched in champagne, carrying the trophy, and I said, "Oh, well done, mate." And he said, "Yeah, there's life in the old goat yet," and he's absolutely right. It was so. There've been that. There've been Charles Leclerc winning at home after all the heartbreak in recent years, and pedaling back to his mum's house on his bike and going, "Hey, I've won the Monaco Grand Prix." Amazing stories, and obviously McLaren boys winning their first wins as well.
Have you had a favourite moment in the commentary box? Because, by the way, we've loved having you on comms. It's great having you there.
It's been fun. No, I've really, really enjoyed it. I think being in the commentary box of the British Grand Prix, I was there with Martin and Crofty, just watching that race, and when we were all in it together and listening to the radio, and just it's so rare for us to have a race where after the first pit stop, any of the top 5 can win. We probably had that at Spa as well, actually, but. Yeah, I'd have to say the British Grand Prix, being in the commentary box, has got to be the highlight.
Shall we have a look at some predictions? Let's first of all go back to the predictions that you gave us.
Oh God!
At your house when we were having that amazing curry night.
Yeah.
So your predictions were Max, Lewis in second, Charles in third, George in fourth.
Oof.
And the constructors, Red Bull in one, McLaren second, Mercedes third, Ferrari fourth.
Okay, I've got one bit right.
The more interesting one are the drivers, aren't there? So the drivers thing is the interesting one there. So you're still sticking with your 1 and 2, or your 1 at least?
Yeah, I think I've got to stick with Max.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to revise this? Is this what's happening?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Is this a mid-season revision here? Okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we can change it.
So I'm going to go bold and say, shall we say Oscar second?
Yeah.
Lando third.
Yeah.
Lewis fourth.
Funny how things change so quickly, isn't it?
Yeah.
Betty's predictions were interesting. She said, drivers-wise, Lando in first, Charles in second, Oscar in third. And then she said constructors, McLaren first, then Mercedes, then Aston. Didn't even put Red Bull in there. We were just so bored. I think we were so bored of it by that point. We just thought, no.
Well, she bought into the Dan Fallows thing, didn't he? Because, Christian just kept telling us Dan Fallows was going to fix the world.
We had, of course, that episode was where the famous, not the Dan Fallows came from. And we got shouted that by someone in the crowd when we were doing our Silverstone live shows.
Did you?
Someone said, it's Dan Fallows. Yeah. My predictions were Lewis first, Fernando second, Alex Albon third.
Alex Albon third.
How drunk was I that evening? Terrible shout.
Well, I was wheeling out some special Indian gin that evening, so...
Oh, you were? That's true. I'm blaming the Indian gin. I am. And also, I like to shock. That's it. I wanted to be controversial. So I say something stupid. But no, I really do think that Oscar is... I agree with you on that, on your revised prediction, that I do think that it will be Max, followed by Oscar, followed by Lando, followed by Lewis. I think that's how it should be, and maybe how it deserves to be at the halfway stage. I want to talk a little bit to you now, Karun, about the switching of seats and switching of teams, because I think we had the same grid as we did last season this year, didn't we? That was one of the first times that's happened. It was unchanged. Next season, almost entirely different.
Yeah,
it's such a new grid next year, which is obviously exciting for loads of reasons. Nervy for some of the drivers. As a former driver, one of the more stressful elements of your job, I guess, the securing of seats and not knowing where you'll be, but having to focus on the race, but not knowing where the next season will be and all the rest of it.
It's really tricky because you kind of, I guess in your head, any driver would have, what's my best case scenario? What's my next best case scenario? And what's the seat I'll take if there's nothing else going? That's your kind of top three. And obviously Lewis triggered the moves with a shock in, was it January, February? Anyway, earlier this year.
Yeah, early, yeah.
And then that had the immediate knock-on effect of Carlos Sainz and Mercedes. And it's one of those things when you've been on the outside, it's quite nice to be watching because it adds a layer of intrigue into the season. But being one of the players in the market who is unsettled, I think is really not a good feeling. Not knowing, it's like anyone in life, right? If you don't know what you're going to be doing with your job or what your life is going to look like for next year and beyond, that is unsettling. It doesn't matter whether you're a doctor, lawyer, or radio presenter. It doesn't matter what you're doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also sports fans, obviously I'm guilty of this sometimes, you forget that they are human beings at the centre of this.
Yeah.
And actually, just to use a very recent cricket comparison, I was at Lords yesterday for the Owen Invincibles London Spirit 100 game, and I bumped into Jason Roy, obviously Surrey legend, played for World Cup winner for England, played in the Ashes, opened the batting in the Test matches. Jason Roy, and recently wasn't picked up by Open Invincibles. Now has been picked up by Northern Superchargers. So my point is he moves around a lot, and I had never really chatted to him much about it. And we reminisced about the Ashes, and he said, "God, that was brutal. I was thrown in there. I wasn't ready to do that. Opening the batting against that Australian is very difficult." And you do forget that there are humans at the centre of this that want to have a living, want to fulfill their dreams and essentially want to just drive fast or play cricket. And I do think that a lot of the discourse around Formula One, we just think, and I'm definitely guilty of this, by the way, these are multimillionaires that don't have any feelings, but of course they do.
Yeah.
So it's been hard. It would have been quite hard for Carlos this season, which is one of the reasons why I've loved watching him drive so freely.
And fair play to him. He's not really let it affect his driving, has it? He's almost used it to give him some motivation to get the results. You know, if you look at the championship table now, he's 15 points behind Charles, but let's not forget he missed a race in between. Yeah. I'm not saying he would have got third, but he would have been, Behrman got seventh, you'd have to say, with all due respect. Carlos would have probably been ahead of him because of just experience. So, yeah, he's been an equal for Charles this year, hasn't he? Despite the fact that, all of this stuff going on in the background. We know he's off to Williams now. But I think you're absolutely right. Job security and having the right headspace is super important for sport. You know what? We have the best example going on right now with the Olympics. Look at Simone Biles. It's amazing, right? I watched the documentary on her, the 2-part documentary that's come out, and you just see how she's come back, and she looks happy. You watch this run of the Olympics she's had in Paris. You just see her smiling and bouncing, and and she's delivered. It's been so amazing to watch. You're just in awe of it, and that just shows, right, how being in the right mental frame of mind works.
You can tell as well, can't you? You're right. You can see the happiness. You can see someone being relaxed. You can see what you really want with your favourite sports people is that they can just show off in front of you. That's it.
You want them to deliver to their full potential.
Yeah.
That's when you want to believe that you're cheering for someone, you're watching someone, you know what they're capable of, and you want them to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important.
On that note, as we seamlessly segue into Logan Sargent, who, as we know, is a really great bloke, really funny, really interesting, has got a lot going on in his head, but has had to drive stressed a lot of the time this season, I feel. And you can see that on his face, and you see it in the way he talks on social media sometimes and says, sorry guys, wasn't the weekend for us, we'll keep pushing, all the rest of it. That is exhausting for a driver. Yes, of course the team suffer, but for them, he's at the sharp end of it. It's been really tough to watch at times, isn't it? Because you just really want him to do well.
It has been tough to watch. And you know what? I get no pleasure out of seeing anyone having a tough time. I think same with Checo, right? It's been brutal to watch. As we sit here in the points table, what is he now, 7th at the moment, less than half of what Max has got. That's not enjoyable to watch. It's been tough, and the same for Logan. But that is Formula One. It's a meritocracy. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal, and there's nowhere to hide. Yes, it is a team sport, but ultimately, when all of those mechanics and engineers walk away on the grid and the 20 cars line up for the start, in so many ways, it turns into an individual sport, especially in qualifying as well. When you've got to go out and do those 20 cars that are on track for that one lap, you've got to mentally be in that position to just extract the maximum performance. And it is an individual sport in that respect, absolutely.
But he'll be all right. He'll find something else, won't he? He'll find some happiness.
He'll probably go to IndyCar.
Maybe that's where he was destined to end up. He's done Formula One. He's operated at that bit of the sport, and he's done well and proved that he can do it, and he can drive fast and hold a team and do all that kind of stuff. And his profile is massive now.
It is, and the reality is for Williams, as soon as Sainz was available and an option, it's a no-brainer. Because, Sainz and Albon actually gives them probably one of the best lineups for next year. So, it's a no-brainer.
Do you think Williams are getting more out of that than Carlos is?
100%.
So do you, as you were saying earlier, there's like a first choice, a second, and oh my God, I just need a drive type thing.
Yeah.
Where is Williams for Carlos then?
I think his first choice was probably Mercedes, then Red Bull, and then Williams. And it's not a secret, right? He'd been chasing either a Mercedes or a Red Bull seat as soon as he was let go by Ferrari. Listen, he's a driver from one of the top four teams who's leaving that bracket of top four teams, going to the next rung down. That is reality.
Mm.
And I think Carlos is a pragmatist. And he and his dad have been around the sport for so long. He just wanted a bit of honesty and and he wanted to feel loved, and he wanted to have a team that was saying, as James did, he stood there on Sky F1 in Canada and openly said, Carlos Sainz is my number one target. And that was in June, 2 months before they announced the deal. So, and for Carlos to hear that is a bit of ooh, that's good. These guys, they publicly are saying that I'm their first pick. So that is a good feeling for someone, I'm sure, who's been dropped by their existing team, right?
I think it's really interesting. I think it's a really interesting move because having watched James Vowles operate and having chatted to him, he means it. He's really keen on the ethos. He's really keen on, and as you're saying, you want to go somewhere where you're going to be valued. And my God, are Williams going to love working with Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz when he turns up? That's a treat for all those people.
Yeah.
I think how much all the backroom and all the engineers are going to learn from Carlos. I think that's quite cool as well, isn't it? Having someone that experienced in there with all those championship winning engineers and mechanics of the future.
Yeah,
it's valuable experience for them, isn't it? So it's a big move for the company, really.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I'm still, for his sake, I'm still a little bit disappointed Mercedes didn't take him.
Why didn't they?
Because they strongly believe in the Antonelli project, if we can call it that. They are.
And you think it is going to be Kimi?
Yeah, I think so. I know you did a very good job trying to entrap Bradley Lord into blinking an answer, but he's very smart, old Bradley, isn't he? He's very strong-willed.
He is, but I do think he did mention the F2 to F1 pipeline.
Yeah,
and I think that's what he meant by Kimi.
Yeah, no, listen, and they're doing loads of testing with him, and I think the testing is going well. So on the whole, and you have to say, Kimi, he's quite a few places ahead of Ollie Behrman in the F2 championship and their teammates, which is the only real reference point in F2. So I do think he is a very special talent, but he's also very young. And so my view would have been, why not? It's because 2026 is a very different F1. We got a whole new car, whole new set of rules coming, and actually I think experience would help. So I would have thought a Carlos and George combination for the next 2 years, while you get the last year of 25 into 26 with the new rules, would have been quite good for Mercedes to come into the new era. And Kimi would still only be 20 years old, right? So they could still get another 2 decades of value out of him.
Yeah.
But clearly, they, and in a way, on the flip side, you have to applaud Mercedes because we constantly say that teams are not bold with their choices. We constantly say that teams are doing the boring things and taking the boring decisions. And actually, here you've got Toto and a top team rolling the dice and taking a risk on a young upstart. And actually, you go, you know what? I kind of respect that as well. So I am slightly conflicted with, with how I feel on this.
I think it was Christian who made this point about not wanting to miss the next Max Verstappen like Mercedes did when Max was quite young. And I wonder if that plays into it a bit.
Yeah, but it's different. I think it's different because they would have learned from that and they could contractually lock Antonelli down, by saying they would place him. Listen, James Vowles would have had Antonelli in a heartbeat. I know he hugely rates him because he used to look after him when he was at Mercedes. He was, on the driver development program. So I basically think it could have been the other way as well. You could have had Sainz at Mercedes, Antonelli at Williams, and then in 2 years, you could have done the swap.
Yeah.
Because between James and Toto, they could have controlled that little part of the market. And, Toto also manages Ocon. He's still got an interest in Bottas, so there's a few plays there between Audi and things. He kind of can't control that bit of the market.
Hang on, Toto manages Ocon?
Yeah, has done for many years.
So it's such a tangled web, isn't it?
Well, no, he's just a smart operator because he's got his his finger on the pulse, and it gives him the opportunity to to kind of control the market.
Yeah, fascinating.
He is just a very smart operator.
Let's do a question from Kevin, who's in New York, not a million miles away from where you are. Well, not that close, I guess. My wife and I, says Kevin, both got into F1 through Drive to Survive, and we have gone seriously all in. We watch every session, we play fantasy teams, and are even thinking about a trip to Silverstone. What we don't have is a lot of historical knowledge of the sport. If you happen to have a Formula One expert to hand, and I think you might have, can you please ask them where we should start in getting a more in-depth knowledge of the sport? Good idea, Karun. Where could they go?
Well, I would start by watching the season reviews. They are, they're really, they're a good way to just try and recap what's happened in the past. You could go on the F1 website and buy the DVDs of every season review. If you want, I'll give you my favorite seasons.
Go on then.
I'd say 86, 91. Oh, no, sorry. 97 is my absolute favorite, followed by 86, 91. They're my top three favorite seasons. And then we go into, for drama and controversy, nothing will top 2007. And there's a book called Formula One. I think it's called Formula One, the Autobiography. And it's not a recent book. I think it's probably written maybe 10 years ago. But it's a really good book in terms of giving you just like a general overview of how the sport has got to where it's got. So there's a few little tips here.
Also, Karun is an incredibly modest man. He has a book called Drive to Victory, which was aimed at children, wasn't it? But a good one to get into the world of F1 with.
Yeah, it's coming out in February next year for the start of the 2025 season.
There you go. So Karun's book on the way. There's a Will Buxton book coming soon.
Yep.
As well, which is all about sort of the history of Formula One and what everything means. Also, Christian always talks about the actual subscription to F1 TV. You can watch basically any race, can't you, from history?
I think so, yeah. I haven't actually subscribed to that, but I think the season review, because I think with watching any race, that's a lot of hours, right, to commit to watching 2 hours of every race.
You need context, don't you?
Yeah, but I think the season review DVDs they used to do, it's sort of, I don't know, they've gotten a bit more just like, we'll just edit the highlights together these days. Whereas I remember when I was growing up in the 90s, or late 80s, early 90s, they really made a lot of effort into telling you some backstories and telling you what had happened. You watch the 94 season and the aftermath of the Senna accident and how the rules change. And they really explain to you all of that stuff. Yeah. I think all of those season reviews are just a great way to kind of, skim through and still learn the narrative of how F1 seasons unfolded.
I want to talk about your other interest, your other job, I suppose, which is as a circuit designer. Christopher is in Australia and says, a question for Karun as a driver and circuit designer. What are some of the elements that make a track so good to drive or race on? And are they two different things entirely, i.e. in a sense of purely driving versus actually racing? They
are. If it was purely for driving, you'd have a track full of high-speed fast corners and chicanes and, you just build a high-speed circuit. But that'd be pretty crap for racing. I think you're going to have tracks with high-speed corners, medium, low-speed corners, which are tricky, sort of turning and braking rather than just braking a straight line. You have to create overtaking opportunities, which normally means, two slower corners, one after the other, like they have in Bahrain, turns 1 and 4. I think a couple of long straights to create the DRS and the slipstream is useful. And elevation changes and camber, I think so. You got to have all of these elements come together. Try and use the natural terrain. If you've got a hilly terrain, it's better because actually moving earth is horrendously expensive to try and build a track and build. If you had to manually, if you had to do a man-made Eau Rouge,
I was going to say, yeah,
utterly millions just to do one corner, just to move the earth and do the foundation for that.
Do you have a favourite that's currently on the calendar?
Suzuka.
I was going to say, is that the circuit you wish you designed?
Yeah, 100%.
Why?
100%. It's got everything, right? It's got all of these things that I just mentioned. Probably Suzuka. The only thing it misses now is a more definitive overtaking spot, right? Because it actually is quite a hard track to overtake on now.
And what are you working on at the minute? Are you allowed to tell us what you're
designing or working on?
I can tell you about one of them, which is actually part of the reason why I'm here, is we're doing a track just outside Toronto on here. So I'm going to go.
I wondered whether there was a reason. See, look, even you can't do a summer break.
Well, don't tell my wife, but there is an ulterior motive. So,
yes, let's go and see your parents. I can't wait.
So, we've got a track up here called Oro Station, which is about a 90-minute drive north of here. We've got a couple of potential F1 projects on the go, which can't really talk about.
That's cool.
Yep, we're opening India's first ever international kart track, which the team at. So I work with the team at a company called Driven International, based in Surrey, and we've done India's first ever international kart track, which for me is a really important thing to do, because I grew up at a time in India where there was no karting. I never did a go-kart race in my life. I'm probably one of the last F1 drivers to have got there without having done a go-kart race. And it's at a track in Madras, my home city, where my grandfather designed the main racetrack in the 1980s. So he and 5 of his buddies, by that time, they literally used, very basic engineering tools and sketched this thing out while they were sitting in a bar at the local club.
Yeah.
And so the car track is going to be right alongside the track that he designed nearly 40 years ago.
How amazing.
Yeah, and we're opening the circuit on the 19th of September, just before the Singapore race. So I'm going to go across for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a moment that'll be.
Yeah, it's cool. And, we're lucky my grandfather's still with us. He's 93, so he's not running around. But
You'll probably beat him then.
Yeah. But it's cool because I took my kids to the track in January this year. And I'm pretty sure that made us the first family to have 4 generations to have driven around the same track, because my son sat on my lap and steered the car around the circuit, and then we put him in a cart and he drove around the main track. So it's pretty cool. We've had 4 generations driving around the same circuit that one of us designed.
Karun, can we please do a go-karting expedition next time? Would you come karting with them?
Surely we've got to combine it with a cricket tour, haven't we? You could come to India and come karting there. Go watch cricket in India.
We'd love to do that. I mean, I would love to do that. I don't know if Betty and Christian would. I think producer Jimmy would like that. I think he'd be up for it. But yeah, why don't we...
He'd be up for it.
Yeah, Jimmy's in. He's just told me.
But otherwise, we'll go to a wet day somewhere in the Midlands and have a karting day out, won't we? There we go. Winter podcast at a kart track somewhere.
I'd love that. That would be really, really fun. Karun, thank you so much for your time today. I could talk to you for hours, and I think that the story about the karting track in Madras is a really nice place to end it on. And it's really lovely to chat to you about the sport, but also to get to know you even better. And it's I know the listeners love having you on, so thanks for your time.
No, always happy to jump in.
When can we see you on telly then? Where are you off to next? Where's the next bit?
God, I've had brain fade here. Monza.
Nice. So not Zandvoort.
Not Zandvoort. Anthony Davidson and I have a friendly agreement with Sky that we each do one on either side of the summer break. So I did Spa, he'll do Zandvoort, so we each get an extra week holiday.
What a fantastic arrangement that is. Karun, thank you so much. We will see you hopefully very soon, and we'd love to get you back on whenever you can.
Sounds good.
It's always a treat. What a wonderful man. I've got a lot of time for Karun Chandhok, and I'm sure you enjoyed that just as much as I did. As Karun has gone, we're going to wrap up the episode. Before I go, though, I want to remind you about our very useful pals at NordVPN. They can be very useful if you are a big F1 fan, which I imagine you are because you're listening to a Formula One podcast. Wherever you are in the world, you can use NordVPN to change your virtual location and sort out some of your admin. Because some flights and hotel fees and everything change depending on where you book from. So changing your location when you're sorting your logistics can help you spend less. And of course, you can also obviously watch all your favorite streaming sites and everything. Keep up to date with everything on and off the track as if you're at home. You can do that all safe in the knowledge that NordVPN is protecting all your data while traveling and using public Wi-Fi wherever you are in the world. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, just go to nordvpn.com/TFATC. That's a special link for us because we're special. nordvpn.com/TFATC. That link will give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, and there's no risk
with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the description of this episode. Thank you and goodbye.